This is Coda Radio, episode 580 for July 23rd, 2024. Hey friend, welcome into Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and the business of software development and the world of technology. My name is Chris, and sitting right over there, it's our host, Mr. Dominic. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Chris. I don't know how we're going to fill the show. Nothing happened while we were gone.
I know, right? Nothing to talk about. Poor us. You know, and even though there's plenty to talk about, I still have just a brief bit of complaining to do.
Naturally.
Right off the top of the show, right off the top. My bad, everybody. I apologize. I came into the studio today, and I discovered that all of us collectively have a problem. Yeah, sorry. You may hear banging in the background, and no, that is not Drew partying like normal. It is construction happening nearby, and it's loud. It's really loud, so there may be some odd bangs and stuff while I'm speaking. But I don't know. I think it should be tolerable, I hope. I don't know if you saw, because there's bigger things going on, so the show must go on. I don't know if you noticed. There's a few things happening. This morning as we record, 5 Senate Democrats sent a letter to Sam Altman with 12 questions. And question 9 I thought was a very interesting one. They're all pretty standard except for 9. Question 9 says, quote, will OpenAI commit to making its next foundation model available to the U.S. government agencies for pre-deployment testing, review, analysis, and assessment? They want to be beta testers. Isn't that great?
You always need more QC testers on your project, right?
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
I think that's fantastic, so I'm really happy to see that.
You are?
Uh-huh.
Wait, what?
No, of course not. I just thought, what if I just steel man this and this is great, because federal government has got a good reputation for creating really solid software and delivering on platforms.
I was just like famously amazing at emerging tech.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Uh-huh. So apparently it's led by Senator Brian Schultz. That seems to be the main senator behind this. They also were looking for information on employee agreements. Those we heard a little bit about those sort of silencing agreements that Sam had no idea about. Just had no idea.
Listen, can I take a side note? Because I was listening to your favorite podcast, The Verge.
Oh, that's mine. Okay.
And apparently, Mr. Altman got bamboozled by a company building him we actually have to have some sympathy here for the poor guy. He was trying to build a very modest cottage of $27 million.
Just like a little vacation cabin kind of thing.
Like an in-law suite, right? Unfortunately, they only delivered one to the value of $11 million.
Oh.
And he's suing them.
Oh, because he wanted one for 28.
Well, he didn't get what he paid for, right? Now, I know, I agree on principle, but I just think the numbers are so large that this is hilarious. For a company that loses money every minute of every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, just throwing it out there. $27 million mansion. Oh, I'm sorry, not a mansion. Not a mansion. They're quick to distinguish because you get to define mansion any way you want, I guess. It's just a really large house over San Francisco. So
Sam did stack a W today. His UBI experiment that he threw a few $1 million at him and a few other investors.
His bar tab.
They wrapped up, and they're pretty stoked about the findings. Universal basic income seems to be one thing that definitely seems to be true is everybody kind of increased their spending. Interestingly, it seems like, now I've only just glanced at the study, but interestingly, it seems like young folk and unmarried folk dropped out of the workforce, which is not what they were expecting. And they just sort of lived on the UBI. Other folk just increased their spending. But the details are out there. Busy week for Sam.
Tough week. I mean, it really, Chris, when you were building your palace, I'm assuming somewhere near the Seattle Space Needle, and you just don't get the luxury that you've become accustomed to. It's got to be heartbreaking, right?
Yeah. I got to have a bidet in every toilet or I'm not happy.
I got to tell you, though, give me like $50,000. I will bidet all the toilets.
Yeah. I could probably undercut you and do it for 45, I bet.
Now we're talking. Let's take it off the air. Bidets
All right.
everywhere.
All right. Okay, one last thing on the OpenAI stuff. So you've got this pack of senators. It seems to be, a group of them. I'm sure it'll actually get bigger, actually. 5 right now. I bet you it's 8 to 10, by the end of the year. They're pressuring OpenAI to work hand in glove with the government at all ages and all steps, at all levels, from the beginning of a product at its conception to before it ships to while it's shipping. Also, they want to be intimately involved with the employee agreements. So you have that pressure coming from the senators. But also, OpenAI released a statement saying, "We're down to clown, boys. How can we help? Let's get together and kumbaya. Do y'all want to jump on a Zoom and just work out how we're going to do this? Because we're down." So that was OpenAI's, I'm paraphrasing, but that was their response.
Oh, I thought that was their formal letter to the Senate.
Yeah, wouldn't it be awesome?
We are down, clown emoji.
And then the OpenAI former employees, the quote-unquote whistleblowers, their lawyer who's representing all of them is pushing for all of this as well. So you have the former employee group that's suing. They're pushing for the same thing. You have the senators that are pushing for this. And you have OpenAI themselves. They're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's moat up. Let's moat up. And it's all these forces that are pushing a company that, again, is ironically named OpenAI to be opaque, to be completely down to clown with the federal government and all of this stuff. And I just think, what a situation we have here. What an incredible situation. There's no incentive at all not to do this. No one in the entire structure, from Microsoft to the senators to the former employee suing to Sam Altman, no one's incentive is to keep this thing a public good, to keep this thing actually free from government meddling. And by the way, people listening to this show might not be too concerned. I don't know, I am, but they might not be too concerned about the United States meddling. But what if you live outside the United States? I don't know if people know this, but there's other countries out there too. There's a whole world out there. And it's not all under the jurisdiction of the United States. You understand that?
I do. I'm very concerned for Belgium.
Yeah, right, specifically. So then, okay, I just think that's an incredible dichotomy we have over there. But then you've got the Zuck path.
So I'm far more cynical than you, which is saying something in this case.
Yeah, it is.
I think this is, once again, another backdoor play for the thing they've been trying for, 2.5, 3 years now, to get what they call regulation, which I call a moat, right? They want to dig a big, beautiful Florida moat with gators and all to make sure that no upstarts can come in with either an open source project, a la Zuck, although I wouldn't consider Facebook to be an upstart, or any other projects to challenge them. What they call moderation and responsibility is
safety,
effectively a tax on doing business that challengers won't be able to afford. So
this is exactly how it played out. Well, not exactly. I shouldn't say that, but it is echoes of, or maybe it rhymes with how it played out for the phone companies, for the radio companies, for the television and the cable networks. Essentially, one ends up working with the federal government and gets a blessed moat.
Oh, Ma Bell.
Yeah. So, things can change over time. But then you have, this, like I said, the Zuckerberg path. And today they released Llama 3.1, which includes a 405 billion model. Whatever. I can't even conceive the size of that now. Well, a 405 billion parameter model, I guess, means that it's huge, right? It's
right.
At this size, you could now use it to train smaller models, is sort of the idea, I think.
Would you say it's a meta model?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I got a little audio from the Zuck. He's doing these publicity tours every time they release a major version of Llama, and he's killing it. He's just killing it. So in this clip, he introduces new Llama, and then he kind of makes a Linux comparison. So I think it's worth sticking through the whole clip for, because he kind of gets into how he sees the whole open models ecosystem playing out like Linux did in the past.
Released today is Llama 3.1, and we're releasing 3 models. The first time we're releasing a 405 billion parameter model. So it's by far the most sophisticated open source model that I think anyone has put out. And it really kind of is competitive with some of the leading closed models, and in some areas is even ahead. So I'm really excited to see what people do with that, especially now that we're making it so that the community policies around Llama allow people to use it as a teacher model to distill and fine tune and and basically create whatever other models they want with it. In addition to that, we've distilled the 405 billion parameter model down to make newer and updated and now leading for their size 70 billion and 8 billion parameter models. They also have really good performance, really good kind of cost per performance ratios. So I'm really excited to see what everyone does with this. Taking a step back, I think this is a pretty big moment for open source AI. I've been reflecting on this, and I kind of think it's, I've thought for a while that open source AI was going to become the industry standard. And I thought that it would basically follow the path that Linux did, where, if you go back to before Linux was popular, there were all these companies that had their own closed versions of Unix. And at the time, there's nothing that was sort of that sophisticated that had ever been done as an open source project. And people thought, hey, no, this is like the closed model of development is the only way to do something that's this advanced. And at first, Linux kind of got its foothold because it was cheaper, because developers could customize it in different ways. And then over time, as the ecosystem built out, it got more scrutiny, so it actually became the more secure one. It became the more advanced one. There were more partners that basically had built more capabilities. In the case of Linux, more drivers and things like that. That basically ended up making it have more capabilities as well than any closed source Unix. So I think that this moment with Llama 3.1 is kind of like that inflection point where I think Llama has the opportunity to become the open source AI standard, for open source to become the standard, the industry standard for AI. And even in the places where it's not yet ahead on performance, it leads on kind of cost and on customizability and on the ability to take the model and fine tune it and do all the things that you want with it. So I think that those are just huge advantages that we're going to see developers take. And we're focusing on building out this partner ecosystem, and there are going to be all these different capabilities that get built out around it. So yeah, really excited.
He kind of goes on to say that he expects businesses to want lots of little models. And he gives examples of how even large companies like Facebook that want to use LLMs might actually want to spin up a lot of little tiny models that maybe one day you go into your Facebook account and you turn on the autorespondent that is an LLM trained on you. And it's clear that you're talking to a language model, but it's a language model that responds as accurately as you would. It'd be like an agent for you. And that would be like its own dedicated little model that they'd run. And so he sees this future of lots of little models.
Ah, yes, setting even more indistinguishable spam marketing emails.
Oh, yes, definitely. It's pretty impressive that they're getting this thing as competitive as it is. I don't know exactly like the language here. It's a little weird. Like the 405 billion parameter model is apparently being initially shipped out with partners. I don't know if you can download it directly. But then there's also been a license changed.
I don't know. I mean, I've been meaning to check this out, but the vagaries of I don't know if you know this, Chris, but there's only so many hours in a day.
Yeah, it's true. That's true.
Yeah, I've been unable to do so, which sucks.
Yeah. I keep glancing off it. I play with it for a day or two, and then basically after every major release, I play with it for a bit, and then I kind of move on myself. But I've been talking to listeners that are building tools. In fact, just at the meetup, shout out to the listeners that made it to the Spokane meetup a couple of Sundays ago. I was talking to a Coda Radio listener there. Works for a company that you're familiar with in the tech industry, and they're building, on top of large language models right now internally for tooling. And I think, this kind of stuff, it will make a big difference for them and for folks that are doing that kind of stuff. And, it's significantly cheaper, say, than paying for a bunch of subscriptions for all your staff if you can get something like this running in-house.
It's not crazy, right? It makes a ton of sense.
In the crazy category, though, there is plenty of that. Reporting coming out from NPR that the Taiwanese government is paying farmers not to grow rice because industry needs the water for AI chip manufacturing. That's the report that, because it actually does take a significant amount of water to do this manufacturing. And so Taiwan has a serious drought right now, maybe the worst in a century. And so what are they doing? They're paying farmers not to grow rice for the third year in a row.
Eating, I don't know. It's so 2000 and late. I learned a new slang from the teenagers. This is great.
Why grow something that you can import and buy from the store? Who needs to grow stuff?
Import from a country that is dying to invade you. Yeah, go for it.
Woo!
Wisdom. No, but from a purely evil capitalist point of view, it kind of makes a ton of sense, right?
We better see real results. I mean, these chips better deliver AI models and capabilities that actually make it worth it.
I just don't think we can. Just the numbers are too big. I hope I'm wrong. I really do.
Coder.show/membership. Support the show directly and use the promo code SUMMER to take $1 off your membership forever. I'm extending the summer promo to the Coder Radio program. It's for new members and I think reactivations as well. Just use the promo code SUMMER when you check out. You'll take $1 off forever while you support the show, and you get an ad-free version of the podcast, and you get the Coderly, which we just posted. You can also boost each production directly to give a little value back to that episode. And the beauty about that is the split system. A piece of the action goes to the podcast creator. The developer who writes the podcast app gets a small percentage, as well as the entire Podcasting 2.0 backend infrastructure. So not only are you supporting the show directly with no middleman, but you're also supporting the ecosystem that makes podcasting and Podcasting 2.0 possible. Never before really have podcast app developers had a direct path to monetization. They'd have to cram in some ads or more and more membership stuff and lock stuff behind paywalls. But with the value for value split system, when you boost, they get a little bit, they can keep going. It's really slick, and it's not just a way to support the show, but it's a way to support the broader podcasting ecosystem. And then you get your message read on the show, anything above 2,000 sats. You can now boost from the web, too. If you go to coder.show/boost, you could just send your boost in from the web without having to switch apps. If you are ready to switch apps and you want to get in on the new fun, just go to podcastapps.com and pick out something like Fountain or Podverse or Cast-O-Matic or TrueFans. They're all just really great. Couple of ways to support, and we need it more than ever because it's a fully independent, listener-supported show. You go to coder.show/membership and coder.show/boost. Thank you very much. Now, by this point, you probably have heard, or maybe even were directly impacted by the CrowdStrike outage on Windows systems. As you probably know, CrowdStrike last week released a sensor configuration update, they call it, to Windows system. That update is part of an ongoing auto update they do for just the Falcon platform, and that update triggered what they call a logic error, resulting in a system crash on impacted Windows systems. The thing is this Falcon sensor system uses a sys driver file that has been marked as boot start privileges, and that means Windows must be able to load that driver to boot. And if the driver has issues, either because it's referencing a bad sys file or whatever it might be, the driver then has the capability of taking Windows out, which, while sucks, is kind of intentional, right? The system and the kernel panics because otherwise you might have data corruption. But because it has this boot start privilege, it means that if it doesn't successfully load, Windows doesn't successfully load. And as a result, about 8 million Windows machines blue-screened if they were online when this update shipped out to CrowdStrike customers.
Yeah, this is kind of wild, right? So on the one hand, I got to be honest, you kind of threw me for a loop. I didn't think about the data corruption aspect of it, but it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks though because you have to go physically to all these Windows computers.
Yeah, it's very strange that the PR wasn't handled great, but ultimately it was a huge deal. Like down here at Tampa Airport, it was in the paper, it was on the front page, I think at the bottom.
Yeah, they broke into morning programming television with a national news broadcast on NBC.
Delta Airlines is one of the hubs at TPA, the Tampa Airport, and all their stuff was affected. People are still they were supposed to do some kind of announcement to their rewards members. They sent an email out just today saying we're not going to do that because we need to help out our customers affected in your area. It's bad. I mean, I personally know people who got screwed. I know people whose work computers were just down for a day. I know people who were traveling. It's not that it's nothing, but ironically, it's what Y2K was supposed to be, right? That all the computers would just kind of say, nope.
Yeah, that's very true. There's a couple of things I think that are fascinating about this. First of all, these anti-malware, protection, antivirus, CrowdStrike type products sort of live and die on this rapid response capability. That's sort of what they sell the whole product on. So they need to be able to blast down immediate updates to systems that are otherwise often under change control management and meticulously taken care of, and every update is thought through and planned and tested. And then these same systems have this auto update feature. But what's really fascinating about this is it really seems that it's a combination of technologies working against everybody here. So, if, for example, in CrowdStrike's case, to work around Microsoft's very slow driver signing process, it just takes forever. CrowdStrike has a kernel driver that dynamically loads and executes code from the file system. So that kernel driver, gets all of the scrutiny, gets all of the testing. But then you have a sys file out there that has a typo in it that's been on the file system for months, and you make one change, and now it all kind of comes together and it blows up. But the other thing that at least Microsoft is claiming is that they claim that a apparent, quote, understanding was reached with the European Commission back in 2009. And, quote, Microsoft agreed to certain rules. And these rules gave third-party security apps the same level of access to the Windows kernel that Microsoft gets. And Microsoft said that, that we'd love to stop that, but we can't. The European Union won't let us. So apparently there's this issue as well. And then just the whole fact that these programs have always had this kernel level access, so it's sort of just become common practice in the industry. And you have all of these things kind of come together for the Windows platform, and then it's wide distribution as well. And it led to something that didn't just reach the normies, it wrecked the normies' day. Like a lot of the things we talk about, a lot of the tech issues, average Joes out there are totally unaware of. But this one affected just about everybody. And it really just cut through immediately, high signal to regular folk. And it's massive. CrowdStrike stock's been down for the last 5 trading days. They're at a low right now. It's not a good image for Microsoft either. It makes Microsoft and Windows look feeble and brittle. And, it's brought up questions of too much reliance on the Windows platform. So there's a lot to this. It's a massive blunder.
It's also interesting how I felt like a lot of the Microsoft employees, like not just the employees, but some of the MVPs, but even do we call them dev evangelists anymore? I don't think we do, right? Because I think they do other stuff, and that's like a side thing.
Yeah.
Felt very pressured to say this is not a Windows bug, which, to be fair, it wasn't. And I felt like CrowdStrike was very eager to say nothing for a while there. They were like, Windows crashes. That's what happens. I don't know.
Yeah, there is an irony, though. Microsoft is making Apple's argument. So this, I think, let's zoom out and look at the wider context here. Apple's claiming, hey, European Union, if you force us to open up the App Store, if you force us to give us the same access to third parties, there could be issues. And now Microsoft is saying, at least they're taking this opportunity to say, hey, look, we followed our agreement, our, quote, understanding with the European Commission. We gave third parties the same access we get. And look at this problem. It took out the world. The whole world went down for a day. The whole world blue screened for a day. All because we were forced to give third-party access to our kernel. Right? I mean, they're making Apple's argument. And Apple, you 100% should expect, will now point to this as a case in point why they shouldn't open up their kernel and their OS to third parties.
I gotta say, if my iPhone had some sort of issue like that and I was on the road, I would be completely screwed.
Yeah. Yeah, there is that. There is something actually to it, right?
I like them around the App Store stuff. I think this whole, you have to open your whole system thing. I sort of don't want, especially you feel this too, right? Users, family members, and friends who call you for IT support. I don't want them to be able to install kernel extensions ever.
Right. I don't want them to install Windows.
I don't want them to buy Android phones, right? I'm buy an iPhone. There's no such thing as other app stores. You're fine.
My take on this is that Windows is old, and you could blame the European Commission, fine, whatever. But the reality is that modern Linux distributions have a mechanism called eBPF that CrowdStrike is using on newer builds of Linux that bypasses their need completely for them to have their own custom kernel module. So there's no custom kernel module to screw up. Microsoft probably should have built a facility for this back in the Windows XP days. And I'm sure there's some facility and some API, but clearly insufficient because they're not using it. And Windows is just old. NT is old. And Microsoft, because of incentives and other things, has just not been focused on the technical debt that is Windows. And they've sold it to customers that probably shouldn't have been buying it. And I don't know who to put that on. Maybe that's on Microsoft. Maybe that's on the customer. Maybe it's on the staff. I don't know. But if you think, you and I have witnessed, and I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast has witnessed, Windows being used in places that it just genuinely should not be used. Maybe they should be using like some minimal OS. Maybe they should be using some slim Linux. Maybe even Android in some of those scenarios would have been a better choice. But instead, they took a general-purpose consumer operating system that's really designed to run Excel and Word, and they built it into hardware and useful systems all over our economy. And it should have never gone that far. And if Microsoft was selling a product to those people, they should have had to build it to be functional. I mean, you can't sell a truck. You can't sell a car without meeting certain requirements if it's going to be used for those purposes on the freeway. There's a difference for cars that never go on the freeway and that are off-road fun,
right.
Bang up cars. And there's cars that are going to be licensed and on the freeway. And I'm not advocating for licensing, but I am advocating for the right product for the right market. And Microsoft knew Windows wasn't it. And instead of investing in the architecture of Windows and producing something better, they just always chase the latest and greatest tech trend and let the technical debt on Windows build while their sales team continued to sell it to places like airports and display terminals and banks and all the other places that we've all witnessed it that it should never have been in the first place. And that's the reality. It should have never been there in the first place. And now it is, and now they're trying to cover their ass with cheap-ass tricks like CrowdStrike, Falcon, or whatever that auto-updates itself and can take your entire network out. And the third-party risk here is crazy because even if CrowdStrike never does it again, Microsoft might, or NVIDIA might, or Intel might, whatever vendors are on there, because it's nothing but a bunch of different companies with thousands of people who have no accountability that can ship stuff to your machine. And that's why in some of these situations, you shouldn't be using Windows and you shouldn't be using these types of products. And we all know it. Every technologist knows it. We all know it. But it just happens anyways. And you know what? It wouldn't probably be any better if they used Android, because they'd be using Android from 2 or 3 releases ago. That's when they'd start the development process, and then they'd never patch it.
And for reasons I'm sympathetic to, though I don't, are bad, the developers on that will hardcore want to pin the Android version, right? That's going to be the first thing they say.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd probably be, they'll start it 2 years before it ever ships. So, and when they start it, it'd probably be a slightly older version of Android already. It'll be like an already released version. They're not going to start like on the dev tree. It really is sad to see. And I've watched this happen over my life, and the entire time I've quietly been panicking, thinking, what are we doing? I wouldn't even trust this on my son's laptop. What are we doing? And yet sales continue, the deployments continue. And all of us know it. We all know how complex these operating systems are. Oh my God. And this is what we get. And when you actually dig into the CrowdStrike issue, it's like 3 or 4 things that went wrong. And you can start to understand why they didn't catch it in testing. Because part of the issue had been sitting on the Windows system, file system already for months ahead of time. It was a time bomb, essentially, waiting to go off when they made this other change. And how do you test that strange combination? I have no idea. But yet it's part of what they have to do. It's part of their product.
I don't even see what they could have done in lieu of this, though, without a major effort. I mean, really, what?
Yeah. And it's so often the software you install to protect yourself is what burns you. Like on Linux, SE Linux is constantly screwing stuff up for regular folks. And it's a tool that's designed to protect you. Antivirus is always making Windows machines slower and crappier and extra disk I/O.
Oh my God, Norton, off.
Yeah, right. And now we have this, right? I mean, back, I think it was like 2010 or something. McAfee shipped out an update that screwed up everybody's computers. I was around when one of the antivirus updates took out all the Citrix Metaframe terminal servers across the country, across the world. One morning we woke up and everybody that ran this antivirus and Citrix Metaframe was completely offline. And once again, it was an airport. It was Kenmore Air. I'll say their name. It was Kenmore Air right here, a client of mine, right here in the Pacific Northwest, was taken offline for a day because of an antivirus update that nuked all of their Citrix Metaframe servers.
Yeah, I have a crazy antivirus story here too. It's
Really?
Norton. So a lot of my relatives happen to be accountants, and I'm sure most people who live in the States are familiar with this, right? E-filing your taxes, or taxes in their case for customers.
Sure.
Well, Norton blacklisted the IRS for like one of the weird proxies that the government uses to So imagine being a small independent accountant having to tell your clients, I don't know why I can't e-file your tax return, but you got to like mail this paper in certified mail. I eventually was able to figure it. Took me about 2 hours to figure it out. And then I looked at his Firefox and I'm like, and yes, I'm the one who made him run Firefox, because get that IE out of here right now. And this is going back almost a decade.
Oh, back in the day, you could get a virus just running IE and visiting the webpage.
Oh my God. And yeah. So I looked and I'm like, what is this extent? Why do you have extensions? Now, I will say I've gotten on board with browser extensions much more recently. Let's say in the last 3 to 4 years. Back then, I was like, they're the devil. And for good reason, right? Because he had like Yahoo Games, and most importantly, I might get the product name wrong, but I think it was something like Norton 360. Someone will email it and fact check me on that.
Yeah, I think I you know what? I remember it being something like Norton 360 before Office 365 or something.
Here's the way it would work. You had to log in, because Intuit, the folks who make the professional version of QuickBooks, and all QuickBooks really, disclosure, I guess, I'm a customer. I use them for my invoicing and stuff, but so what? There's some sort of like handshake they have to do with the feds, with the IRS, to like, which makes sense, right? If you're filing on other people's behalf, they want to know that you are, authorized to do that. There's all kinds of that goes on. Well, at some point, they apparently you used to, I don't think they do that anymore, but they would pop open a browser window. Fine. Unless you have a crazy extension that's blocking things. So what would happen is he'd get like halfway through filing someone's tax return, like literally just to file it, right? To send it to the government. And it would just say unable to connect. And that's all the Battleship Gray dialog box in the QuickBooks program would pop up, unable to connect.
Battleship Gray.
So
That's
finally,
right.
I fucking uninstalled all his extensions one by one. And as soon as I installed the Norton one, I said, try to file, because I was also a client of his and still am, like just file my taxes, right? File my company taxes. Went through instantly. I'm like, all right, go file the guy who you tried to do earlier today. Went instantly. I'm like, I told him, never install that again. Saddest part of this whole story, why I'm going on for so long, he didn't know that it installed the browser extension, because it was an old dark pattern where all the because I ended up getting curious and like looking up what the Norton install process was like. There was a little dialog with a checkbox that was checked by default that said install recommended extensions and other software. No details, no itemization, nothing.
Yes, that's a nice little maneuver. Back in the day, I don't know about this point, but back in the day, you used to be able to customize and go and then unselect some of the sub-selections that added all that crap.
I have a better plan.
Okay.
Don't install Norton.
Yeah, really.
Sorry, Norton. Unless you want to sponsor the show.
Yeah, right. They're great. They're great. No, we kid. So there, that was a rough one. And it's still a rough one for, sysadmins and everybody out there, IT folk that are just going around and having to fix this. You have to get into safe mode. Microsoft's released a tool that helps, but you still have to boot the machine into safe mode.
You got to feel bad for the entry-level help desk person who's just... You have to imagine their Friday was an absolute show, and they were probably getting their ass reamed out. Because this hit, like, I know people who have fancy job titles that this hit, and they were none too pleased.
You have to imagine, too, there's got to be some serious butt covering inside CrowdStrike.
Well, that seems to be why CrowdStrike was so slow to acknowledge the issue, right? Because the lawyer, and in fact, their statement was very lawyered.
Very, yeah. I was very disappointed, I would say, in their communication and how.
Well, but if the CEO came out and said we effed it up, he'd probably be open to shareholder lawsuits.
Yeah. Yeah, even when you read like the issue, it was so unclear. It's like, is this your fault? Is this who? Yeah, but you're right. They don't want to expose themselves to.
Right. He's obfuscating the problem because it admit nothing, deny.
Could be a huge issue.
It could be a real. I mean, think about all these Fortune 100 companies that have these fancy ass Windows servers. Which our next story is going to go here too.
Yep.
business.
So it's not been great for game devs or even server-side systems, like you said.
Just high performance servers. Yep.
Yep. Intel's been supposedly selling what people are calling defective CPUs, because the higher end, like in the case of the desktop version, like a Core i9-14900K,
Such a natural naming convention, by the
is
way.
having error messages and issues when you start maxing out the performance. It's Intel's flagship gaming CPU right now, and it's apparently been prone to crashing with error messages about video memory, despite it actually not being an issue about video memory. It looks like Alderon Games was quoted in a couple of different articles saying that Path of Titans has had to switch their game servers from Intel to AMD due to just instability issues. Not talking about GPUs here, talking about CPUs. And developers at Alderon Games reported frequent instability, even with SSD and memory corruption, when using Intel's latest CPUs for game development.
Yeah, I got to give them props. Actually, Matt, the week we were off, Matt from Alderon Games brought this to my attention, and unfortunately, we had our pre-record, but it was funny. He brought it to me pretty early, and then just watching the story develop with enrage. I'll describe these YouTubers as pretty enraged, right? Like,
yeah,
this is real bad. So, Chris, you're better at this kind of fancy GPU stuff than I am. What exactly is the deal?
It seems, now Intel's claiming, but it seems that it's affecting desktop CPUs and server CPUs, according to testing that Level 1 Techs and Wendell did. But it seems that it is, in certain situations, instability arises when voltages reach at a certain level for like the turbo boost functionality of single core performance. So you're really boosting a single core, you ramp up the voltage, and Intel claims there's a microcode error that causes instability in the 13th and 14th gen CPUs when they try to do this. And it's elevated voltage requests specifically, so when the voltage goes up. They claim a microcode patch to fix the issue is scheduled for release by mid-August, although some of these YouTubers, like you mentioned, are not so convinced this is fixable with a microcode patch. It looks like also, while it was primarily reported by gamers, it took a long time for this to really start to surface and people to understand the scope of how bad it was, because it initially looked like memory corruption issues or even SSD NVMe errors. It would look like an NVMe read error or something. Very strange. And then it also wasn't impacting AMD users. So when you're kind of looking at it, is this like a bug in our game or something like that, where it was predominantly first noticed, it was kind of hard to parse. And then Wendell over at Level 1 Techs got the idea of, well, maybe some of these game developers will let me look at some of their crash logs. And so he looked at the crash dumps and started running some numbers and started realizing, okay, we do actually have some patterns in the data here. And as he started to work with that data, he reached out to hosting companies and started to work with them and got reports on the crashes that they're seeing and realized these were also probably related to the same issue. It took a long time for this to come together because it was like in individual developer logs and individual cloud hosting companies' logs, and it was showing up as something that wasn't related to the CPU.
Well, and Intel was, for quite a while, mum's the word, right?
Yeah, and kind of denying and deflecting as well. And all of this is happening right ahead of Intel's Arrow Lake launch, which also really sucks for Intel because, you look at it, and the recommendation right now is, well, if you don't want any of these problems, you maybe can downclock your CPU a little bit and lose almost about 10% performance.
I was to say, what is the point in buying the fancy CPU?
Which might just be what the microcode update does, for all we know.
Yeah,
it's possible. Or you got to switch to AMD, and Ryzen 9000 looking real good. Looking real good.
AMD's over there like, sucks to be you. Or you could spend more money on your servers and buy Xeons. That is an option available to you.
Well, I wonder if I couldn't tell from the YouTube video. I'm not sure if it might be in some of the most recent Xeons. I'm not sure.
So what I was able to find is no one's seen it in the Xeons yet. At least no one's reported.
Okay.
These are like just a step below the Xeons, right? But and they're more streamlined. Like they're more single core focused. The Xeons are like,
Yeah. Oh.
Apple's over here like Mac Studios can be servers.
I think it's a sign that Intel's really pushing. They're really pushing.
They've been hurting for so long at this point. And AMD, frankly, has been... ARM gets all the attention. Apple gets the attention. NVIDIA gets the attention. But AMD is... Those Threadrippers, man, ooh, they're beautiful.
Well, that's just what I'm thinking, though, is you have this pressure from the Threadrippers for the x86 side, and then you have this pressure on the ARM side for the lower power, extended battery life, and it's looking like two big bullies might be about to eat Intel's lunch if they can't work their crap out.
Because this Mac, knock on wood, should last me a while. The next non-Apple machine I buy, well, it's probably gonna be an AMD machine.
I'm not thrilled about it either. Intel's a good American company.
I like Intel. I don't like.
Yeah.
I know this is an unpopular opinion. That's why I don't read the comments. I'm still mad at NVIDIA for melting my first MacBook.
Yeah.
So and that was the first aluminum one that Apple ended up just replacing like 3 times and never worked with NVIDIA again. I'm not the only one. This isn't a Mike poured gin into it situation. This is the damn thing melted, like the motherboard. I'm sorry. The logic board, because Apple.
Yeah.
There are no moms at Apple. It's a motherless society, apparently.
I was happy to get a new motherboard logic board and battery out of the deal.
Oh, yeah, they replaced everything.
I thought
they just gave you your case back, basically, your case and your keyboard.
Yeah, it kind of worked out for me.
It was inconvenient, though, but yes. I was going to ask, so what are you using in studio now for your high-end media processing needs?
You know what I have really liked, although I only have one of them, but I've really liked the Intel Arc. I know it's crazy, but they made the
newest thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a removable GPU card, and it's an Intel, and it's a little bit nicer than I expected, a little bit faster than I expected. I didn't have huge expectations, and it works great with Linux. Works great, smooth. Everything else these days is AMD, but on the system I'm using right now to talk to you, Intel Arc, and I just think it's for a workstation graphics, it's fantastic. The downside is, and if anybody knows otherwise, please boost in and let me know. The downside seems to be none of the fun AI tools are optimized to do their workload on an Intel Arc.
So it's funny, and I would actually ask the audience because I think we probably have some fanboys in here. I know Framework is coming out with a quote experimental RISC-V laptop, but whatever happened to RISC-V? Did ARM just take its milkshake? I mean,
you wonder if there's a parallel universe where Apple announced the M series that's based on the RISC architecture, and then all of a sudden the PC industry got all hot and bothered about RISC.
There's a better parallel universe. If we're going to go all Star Trek Discovery, and we get an Empress.
Yeah, well, how about if it's going to be a really good parallel universe, there never was a Star Trek Discovery, so...
Send your email to... You know what? I'll take these emails. I agree with that. I support that statement. A beautiful Florida company, Gators and all, called Pi-Star, that made Macintosh clones that Apple sued into oblivion, would still be around, making us the RISC-V Mac we deserve.
Oh, man. Big Tower RISC-V.
You remember those, right? They were the honking, throw some NVIDIA in there. What the hell? It's a PC. Apple's army of lawyers. Yeah.
4 boosts to go.
Now, we have a little bit of a war going on in the boost. Thank you, everybody who boosted in. We're trying to decide the official language of the Coder Radio program, which, as of right now, is Golang. No, it's Golang, but it may change. I'm surprised nobody's boosted in with Objective-C.
They're all dead.
Yeah, oh, that's sad but true. Unknown Sender came in with 112,000 sats.
Holy
Not Golang. The official language of the Coder Radio program shall be Ruby.
Let's be honest, I can't be trusted. I love it.
There you go. Now, only Unknown Sender, you only beat BHH32, who also came in with 100,000 sats. He was trying to hear the horns. He had boosted in 100,000 sats for Rust.
Of course.
And he would have clenched it.
He almost had it. But the Rubyist came to my rescue.
Unbelievable.
So I wrote a ton of Ruby this last several months.
So it's sort of fitting then.
We need castanets for the crab people.
Yeah, a good it's like our vice president language, right? Is Rust. Ruby's the president language. And Rust is the VP. Huh?
Hang on, I'm a little scared because Ruby's pretty old. So is Ruby going to be pressured by Python and Although Python's older.
I think as long as we give Objective-C Secretary of State, everything's going to be
Objective-C is the J. Edgar Hoover. We know it's wearing some lingerie somewhere. Like something's going on.
Thank you, guys. All right, so the official language is now Ruby, but we appreciate both of you, and of course, now the boost to beat is 112,000 sats. Tampa Tech Trekkie comes in with 20,000 sats.
Coming in hot with the boost.
This is my vote for Closure. I can't believe Mr. Payne picked Elixir. Also, for sci-fi books, and I know the movie's brought a lot of attention to it, but it's old, Dune is an amazing novel.
No, it's the spice must flow. The spice must flow.
Yeah, I started watching, this was one of my most recent Epic Dad fails, was we were watching Dune, and something happened the last 20 minutes, like something was wrong with a file or whatever it was, and it crashed the playback. Player couldn't play, like the player actually crashed one time. It just was awful. And then we tried to stream it, and it wouldn't stream, and it was 20 minutes of us trying to just finish the last 20 minutes, and we were like, well, we could have just watched it, we're done now.
Are we
We
talking like
stopped.
80s Doom or Timothy Chalamet Doom?
No, the new one. Yeah,
The effects suck, but I still like the 80s one.
yeah, sure, I get it. You know what's actually still holds up, if you are okay with the effects? 80s Battlestar Galactica, buddy. It's an easy watch. It's fun. It's got some nuance to it.
God, I do love my Battlestar.
And it's a great kind of like, you could start with the 80s one, and then, it gives you an excuse to watch the remake. You got another excuse, so you got to after you watch the 80s.
Of course.
Swiftoid comes in with 4,321 sats.
There's coffee in that nebula.
Hey, Janeway.
Yes, you can imagine my disappointment when Apple named their darling programming language using my surname, Swiftoid. Thanks for the book recommendations. The Bobverse series is indeed excellent. I'm eagerly awaiting a new book being released. Do you think AI will make much of a dent in the writing world, or will be similar to software development, a slightly drunk friend who makes occasionally useful suggestions?
So how much reading do you do? Because there's a lot of books at Amazon before AI that we were slightly drunk friend
No kidding.
vomiting on the page. I think it'll make a... I think there's... I know you mean novels, like, entertainment writing, but I feel like where it's going to make the real dent is our LinkedIns are all going to become the sewer that Twitter and Threads and Facebook are. Because the shovelware marketing content is going to be terrible.
Yeah, the generated. Yeah, here's where I'll take the positive side of it. I definitely use LLMs to get me going. Like if I got a little writer's block and I can't quite figure out like what I want to say here, I can sometimes even just describing to the LLM what I'm trying to write gets me writing.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then often like it gives me a paragraph. I'm like, oh, that sucks. Let me fix this. Let me fix that and fix that. And then let me fix that. Oh, okay, now I'm going. And so just getting over a writer's block, it has been really useful. However, if you're a writer, and you've got published works that the LLM knows about, or maybe you have trained your own LLM, I could see a writer that basically interacts with characters from its books over the years. And you could go in there as the writer and talk to the character a little bit and get some ideas of what to put on the page by having a conversation with the character that you've created over the years. You could see how, like, you could have a Captain Kirk LLM. And maybe even, you have William Shatner, like, blast off on it and co-brand it or something. And you are talking to Captain Kirk based on everything Captain Kirk's ever said. He knows, the thing's been trained on every episode. It knows every little factoid about the Enterprise and all these things. And you could have a nuanced conversation with a Captain Kirk LLM as a Star Trek writer and then go flush out the Captain Kirk you're writing on the page for right now. So I think it could be useful in those ways. But I don't think it'd be useful in actually generating the bulk of the book or the content. I think that would suck.
I mean, I use AI for various, like, getting started things. I just don't think you can say, write my book for me.
Right. I agreesies. Sam Squanch comes in with 10,000 sats. Pew, pew, pew. On the topic of an AI coach, I started to feel a lot like we're trending towards the future of idiocracy that it predicted. Quote, "You have been deemed an unfit mother. Your children have been placed into the custody of Carl's Jr." Oh, no. I hope not, Sam Squanch. Could you imagine? Your children would be better at McDonald's. McDonald's is now taking care of your child.
Well, I bought my wife bought the kid a Happy Meal and me some chicken nuggets, and I'm suffering. I had them at noon today, and I'm still...
You got to be careful. You either got to eat that on the regular or you got to avoid it entirely.
Well, that's the thing. Yesterday, I had a spinach salad with various other greens in it, a spring mix salad, right? And I'm just, I keep going back and forth from super good to garbage, and oh my God.
Same. That's me too. It's really, it's peaked to how busy I am.
That's what it was.
I get so busy that, I don't have time to grocery shop. I don't have time to make anything. And then the other trick I can really pull on myself is, hey, you could even order it, and then you can keep working, and you really need to get this done right now, and so it's kind of worth it. And I always got to talk myself out of that.
You know, I fall for that trap almost every time. I'm like, I got a deadline tomorrow. You know, the kids, they said they were fine with leftovers, and I noticed nobody wanted to eat them. Screw it. Carrabba's Outback Express? Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Then I'm dying the next day.
I wonder if dads are more prone to it as well because, you know, like
the Mrs. Dominic here is not a big fan of the ordering DoorDash. And she's right, because one, it costs more money. If you ever look, most of those restaurants up the price of the individual items.
Yeah, and you got the fees and the tip.
Shamefully, I have a year subscription to DoorDash, so I don't have the fees. But
okay. Yeah.
But you have to tip the guy, and they screw it up half the time anyway.
And it's soggy usually. It's not as
It's
fresh.
cold, it's soggy. Where you could go to the restaurant, actually go out. It's stupid.
Or what my wife says, just use Wife Dash. She's like, God, I'll just go get it.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, the whole point is that we're not busy with that. That's the whole point.
Yeah, that's what she says. That's what Mariah says too. I'm just like, this is. It's just I you know it really is the temptation of just hitting a button and having ribs that I don't need and should not be eating delivered to me.
Yeah.
We're gonna die very young, Chris, if we don't stop.
Yeah. Better podcast while we can. Comes in with 10,000 sats.
BOOST.
Here, have some sats. Thank you, Appreciate it. Nav comes in with 3,000 sats.
Coming in hot with the boost.
Nav writes, wanted to add a second recommendation for Jack Campbell's Lost Fleet series. They're a fun read that anyone that enjoys sci-fi military fiction. I will agree. I agree. You know, and also, just if we're talking books, the combination of something like Open Audible and then Audio Bookshelf, when you're buying on Audible or Amazon, is really nice because they can't ever pull it from you. It's your book. You paid for it. It's on your server. Great little app. Just a simple Docker up away. You know, simple Docker compose. And then you have your own self-hosted audiobook server with good little mobile apps for iOS, Android, and a web interface. And all I do is I buy them on Audible, and then I open Audible them down, pull it down, rip out the DRM, put them on my own server. I don't use them to share. I don't put them up anywhere, but they're just, when I listen to them, I just listen to them on my own system. So I'll give a little recommendation for that. And yeah, the Lost Fleet series by Jack Campbell, I think is a fantastic listen. Great on a road trip. Also great to fall asleep to. That's sometimes my second listen through is I'll just listen to it while I go to bed. DG at PTC comes in with 5,000 sats.
Fun will now commence.
I think colleges are the biggest Gen AI losers. It just trivializes busy work, and it also excels as a teacher. I've been able to refresh so much CS math material thanks to ChatGPT. It completely mitigates the risk of getting stuck self-studying advanced math. Just ask it to explain like you're an 8th grader if you don't understand something, and ChatGPT will dumb down the material as much as you need. Ooh.
No, I think it's a strong use case. Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the dial. I need it even simpler. I need that even simpler. Or I know this, turn it up, make it more advanced. I hadn't thought about that.
You know, I've been using Copilot not to really generate code, but to say, what does this method do?
Sure.
Right? Instead of digging through the various libraries you import, it'll just look and say, blah, 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 give you almost a bullet point representation.
I have used it to explain really complex financial trader terms and stuff as if, you know, I'm a kid. And so I never thought about it for just general learning. But yeah, I could totally see that. That's fascinating. So Hemming. That's probably nailing it. That's probably exactly it.
That's almost certainly what it means.
Yeah, they came in with 5,444 sats.
This is the way.
And I just realized the 5,000 sats were actually supposed to be a Jar Jar boost, so
Use a boost!
there you go, everybody. Sohang says, small business owners have the unique... Oh, yeah, remember that article we read about how small business owners are the absolute worst? Small business owners have the unique privilege to get screwed over by the market megacorps and Congress critters while also screwing over their brethren employees, unfortunate layoffs, tight wages, benefits, profiteering, funding, drama. You straddle this as however you straddle this is how successful you are. I guess so. Yeah, yeah.
Definitely a dark way to look at it, but it's not wrong on its face. Yeah.
Yeah. He also writes, it's beyond time to stop calling Safari a web browser. A web browser is software that implements web standards, RFCs, and recommendations. At best, Safari is a broken and incomplete browser, and at worst case, HTML and CSS to image converter.
Safari is one of the gators in the Apple moat, right? It's especially mobile Safari.
God, that's good. It is a gator. It's not, call it, it's a HTML and CSS to image converter.
Yeah, it's there to prevent you from using, web technologies on.
Oh my God, that's good. Thank you, Sohang. That's great. Magnolia Mayhem comes in with 11,356 sats.
But that's not possible. Nothing can do that.
Right there. Agrees +1 on Brave being creepy, but it makes YouTube watchable again. I wish more creators would move over to podcasting. I didn't realize it made YouTube better. I've been using an extension on Firefox that makes YouTube a little nicer, and I wonder if I could get the name for you. I don't think I have Chrome down here, but it's like YouTube Enhancer, I think it's called, and it just changes some of the defaults, like the default player size and quality, and gets rid of a few of the obnoxious things. It's nice. So YouTube is one of those things that they keep intensifying it, and the tooling around it is adapting, but starting to fall behind. YouTube DL had to do an update recently. NewPipe just had to do an update as well because they keep changing the API. Really, the solution is to get the heck off of YouTube, but we'll see about that. Maybe as video and distribution methods become easier and the bandwidth requirements become less, or at least relatively less, another competitor will come along. All right, the Pod Sage coming in hot.
Coming in hot with the boost.
He says, this is false, talking about the small business owners. The most insufferable people in the world are podcasters and then small business owners. So that means we're still holding down 2 of the top 3. Thank you, Pod Sage. Good point. What about YouTubers, though? I mean, aren't they even a notch above podcasters? Oh, and what about, like, the Instagrammers? And TikTokers.
Oh, no.
Podcasters looking all right in that dynamic. Vmax comes in with 4,000 sats. Boost! The energy sector market software engineer here. Oh, he's an energy sector engineer. Specifically for Chris, not Mike. Those little smart thermostats and light bulbs are actually the foundation for a future green energy grid. Green energy can't handle spinning reserves in the same way that current grid does. Yeah, he says think about, a coal plant that can go on standby versus a solar panel. Peak shaving isn't sexy, but it's critical for a green grid to have any chance of functioning. So, Vmax, are you suggesting that in order for renewable energy to be successful, that we all must have devices that are controlled by grid operators in our house, from lights to thermostats? I just don't think that's going to be a winner. I think there needs to be another solution there. But he says the vast majority of the cost of the grid is in handling of the peak demand, which is why ERCOT in Texas has its cheat code for periodic catastrophic outages. Jeez. There's no little regulation mandating spinning reserves for producers. It doesn't make sense to invest in grid to handle peak consumption. Peak load is usually 1 or 2 hours each day. So we'd be dumping power from the grid to the rest of the time to maintain balance. We need battery technology that doesn't persistently exist. Or peak shaving, which does, which means the green devices. Well, when I think about what that would take, Vmax, it would take every home having smart devices that follow a certain feature set and an API that's available on the internet that isn't a vulnerability somehow, and relies on good judgment from central governance forever. Like, I could totally see it for the first few years, maybe the first 10 years, but forever? I mean, what happens 20 years down the road? There's a protest in one neighborhood. Do you just shut the power out? Do you turn the lights off? There's a lot of, you could see this going real sideways when the wrong person is in office.
That gets very 1984 very fast.
And even if it's never actually going to happen, just people raising those concerns would be enough to, I think, slow this thing down and slow adoption.
But Chris, never again.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking to a guy who runs Home Assistant in multiple locations, and I would be interested in getting information back from the grid on usage. I do have solar production forecasts, so I kind of have an idea in the RV what my incoming power is going to be like, but I have no idea really for the studio. And there's certain gear I could turn off at different times, but I would be more inclined to do it on my own than have somebody reach in and turn off the lights or turn up the thermostat or something like that. Especially because I just kind of disagree that this is the only solution. I'm sure you'll probably disagree with this, but it seems to me that you could just have consumers of energy that could spin up when demand isn't peaking, monetize that energy that isn't being used by the grid, and then when the grid needs that, deliver it back to the grid, and they could shut down. And it doesn't need to be batteries. It doesn't need to be peak shaving. It just needs to be a high demand industrial partner. But you probably know more than me, so I'd be curious to know what you think about that, Vmax. And that's a very thought-provoking boost, so I appreciate it very much. Hal was right, sends in a rocket with 2,100 sats. Thank you, Hal. Appreciate that. Rotted Mood comes in with 15,000 sats. Whoa. Small business owners are obsessed with their business. That's the worst. Have you ever spent time with a CEO of a big business? You think small business owners are obsessed. I'd rather spend time with a small business owner because they have a better sense of reality than those who may own or lead giant businesses. Yeah. How did that not come up?
Yeah, it's a fair point.
Why are small business owners taking all the slack?
You know why? I think I know why. I think when you get laid off or fired from a small business, it's the guy who owns it usually firing you or laying you off. Big business, there's like enough layers where the guy can say, the CEO, he or she could just say, well, we had to make some unfortunate adjustments to this difficult market, and we're coming through this stronger organization. And
they're like 100 people removed,
right?
10 people removed, whatever.
Where it's like the CEO of I don't know, like Microsoft, right? Satya Nadella is just like an idea for most of the employees there.
Yes, exactly.
Where if you and I lay someone off because things didn't go well, it's like
it's probably directly coming from us.
It's like Chris just is such an asshole if he didn't buy this equipment, or Mike's such a dick. Did he need a 96 gig MacBook Pro?
All right, rounding us out is DPG with 10,000 sats.
The traders love the vol.
Hey, Mike and Chris, nearly 2 years ago, I wrote in saying I got my first job in IT, and I believe it was a direct result of Jupiter Broadcasting community and shows like Coder.
Whoop.
I'd like to thank you guys again for helping my career, and I have bought my first house. Whoa! Congratulations!
That's a Coder Radio success story.
That is really cool to hear, definitely. He goes on to say, thanks for all your work to you and the wider JB community and for everything you do. To the audience, join Jupiter.party today. Thank you, DPG, for that update. That's really great to hear. And man, do all the projects begin. I'd love to know what you do, like tech-wise, what you do for networking, if you do any kind of automation, if you do any kind of Wi-Fi stuff for the lights or whatever. Let us know. Keep us posted. Super excited to hear from you. Thank you, everybody who boosted in. We had 17 boosters total. It was a banger of a show, and we stacked 318,471 sats. Appreciate everybody who boosts in. It's all supported by you. The members and the boosters keep this show on the air, and it means a lot to us. It's not a small thing. It's part of what we do every week, because we sit down and try to work hard for you, so that way you find value in the show and find a reason to boost or support us with a membership. So that kind of says we did a good job that week. We appreciate that, and we're going to keep working hard for you, and we hope to keep hearing from you. If you'd like to boost in, go get a new podcast app at podcastapps.com. Fountain has been rocking with the releases recently, and they integrate now with Strike, which is available in over 100 countries, including the EU and the UK. Podverse is GPL and cross-platform, available on the web too, and Cast-O-Matic, you're probably going to love it if you're on iOS. It's designed for an iOS user through and through. All of those and more are listed at podcastapps.com. And thank you, everybody who supports the show. Mr. Dominic, is there anywhere you want to send the great folks before we get out of here?
Yeah, go to alice.dev, and you can follow me on WeaponX at Doomaduco.
Did I give an official endorsement for the Fallout TV series here on the show? I don't know if I mentioned it or not. It's a little gory, so a little bit of a disclaimer. It's not probably safe for kids.
Yeah, I thought we talked about it. But I will second your endorsement.
Okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good summer watch. Okay, good. It's a good summer watch. I couldn't remember if we mentioned that in our last episode because I want to leave everybody with a good show. And I know I already promoted Prodigy, so I had to slip that in there again. You want to find me? You want what? You want to talk to me? What? ChrisLass.com if you want to try Noster out, or I'm Chris Lass on Weapon X as well. And also, give a listen to the self-hosted podcast. Great little pod I do with my buddy Alex, and I think you'll enjoy it very much. So go check that out at selfhosted.show. And of course, links to what we talked about today in this podcast are at coder.show/580. Our contact form is over there, as well as our RSS feed, so you can catch the show every single week. You can also listen live. We do the show on Tuesdays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, at coder.show/live. We got a chat room on our Matrix room you can join. It's nice. You get a little extra show. You get to chat with us, help us name it. Good time. Either way, we're just glad you're listening. Thanks so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Coder Radio program, and we'll see you right back here next week.